Hi, I'm Bobby, and in today's video I'm going to be doing my December book haul. This is the first book haul I've done on this channel, and I have quite a few books to show you today. So in December I had my birthday, Christmas, and a bit of money to spend. So I got quite a few books. I believe there are 17 books in total, which for some people might not actually be that many, but considering I've hardly bought any books for the past year, it is quite a lot for me. So first of all, I'm going to start with the books that I got for my birthday. I have 3 books from my birthday, and I am very excited to show you these. So the first one I got from my friend, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This was quite a popular book a while back, although I believe it is a fairly old book. It was first published in 1992, so this book is actually older than me. But I'm very excited to read this book. I've heard a lot of great things about the story. I believe it is a dark academia following a group of university students. I believe they have an eccentric professor who I think encourages them to take part in some kind of experiment, but they go a bit too far and things get really out of hand. This is supposed to be mysterious and I believe it's a thriller? I'm not sure. But I think it's going to have some quite, like, spooky, freaky elements to it. So I'm quite looking forward to that. It is a little bit outside my comfort zone, but I am very excited to get to this story. The second book on my list is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, who is also the author of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which is just up there on my shelf. I haven't read either of these books yet, so I don't actually know if I like this author's writing, but this book sounds really fun. I first heard about it on Cody's Book Corner, and I believe it is about a man, or maybe a satyr, because there's a satyr there. Also the one, faun satyr, depending on the mythology, travelling through some kind of labyrinth, and there's lots of monsters and different things he has to go through. I don't remember a lot of detail about the story, but I think it is going to be really fun, and it just sounded so interesting. I think Cody has read it and really enjoyed it, so I am looking forward to it. I trust Cody's opinion quite highly, and I am really excited to get to this fantasy story. The third and final book that I got for my birthday is one which has been quite popular recently, and that is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This is a sci-fi fantasy story following a group of people who each have part of the soul of New York inside them. Each of them sort of represents a different borough in New York. I believe there are going to be later books in the series following different cities, and it sounds really interesting how the cities can be alive and their souls are born in people. It sounds absolutely fascinating, and I have heard a lot of good things about this story. I believe I first heard about this book from Reagan at Peruse Project. She influences a lot of my reading choices, and yeah, I've heard N.K. Jemisin's books are really popular, and I want to get to the 5th season trilogy this year as well. I bought that one last year and I'm quite excited for it, but I think a little intimidated by that kind of story, by like sci-fi and fantasy, so I'm not sure, but I'm really excited by this book and I really look forward to reading it. It sounds like such an interesting concept. The second pile of books I have are ones which I received for Christmas. There are 7 books in this pile, so let's get to them. The first one is another dark academia story, which I've heard a lot of, well, I've heard a few mixed reviews, but mostly positive reviews, and I am very, very excited for this story, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Last year I read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and I haven't really read anything else by her, but this book sounded so interesting. This follows a student at Yale who is involved in a homicide. Like, she's one of the victims, but she sort of escapes and everyone else there is killed, and then she is sort of given the opportunity to go to Yale and investigate this mysterious homicide. And it just sounds really fascinating. I've heard some good things, and yeah, I'm quite excited. I know that dark academia is getting a lot of interest at the moment, especially since October, and I think it's about time I actually started trying to get into it. So I look forward to this one. The next book on my list is another fantasy, and that is The Left-Handed Booksellers of London by Garth Nix. I own another book by Garth Nix, which is Sabriel. I showed it on my priority books for 2021, so I want to get to that book as well. I've never read a Garth Nix book, but I've heard his writing is really popular. This story is set in a world where, depending on whether you are right-handed or left-handed, it affects the type of magic you can do. In this book, this girl goes on a quest to find her father, who she has never met, and she comes across these booksellers in London, and I believe they are fighting evil or something, and it sounds really interesting. I like the concept of the magic system. I think it's quite interesting that like left and right-handed people can have different effects. That sounds quite different to what I've heard from other magic systems before. Yeah, it just sounds like a lot of fun, and I love learning a new magic system. I'm really excited to get into this world. The third book I got for Christmas is A Mango-Shaped Space by Wendy Mass. This book follows a character with synesthesia, and I think that's quite interesting. I don't think I've ever read a book with this subject matter before, so it sounds like a lot of fun. I don't really know a lot about the plot, but I believe this is a contemporary story with a magical way of seeing the world around you. I first heard about this book on the podcast Books Unbound, and it sounded so interesting to me. I think they initially mentioned it because it has a cat on the cover, and one of them really likes reading books with cats. That's not why I'm interested in it. I like the idea of looking at the world in quite a different way to how you would normally see it. The next book I got for Christmas is The Sisters Grimm by Menna van Praag. This is, I believe, a fantasy story involving a little bit of sort of witchy magic. It follows 4 sisters, or I believe half-sisters, who all have the same dad. And I think growing up they didn't really know each other. They meet at some point, but then they are separated again a little while later. And then when they reach adulthood, they meet up again, or they go searching for each other, and they discover they each have different magical powers. And I believe these powers are based on the 4 elements, so air, water, fire and earth. So I think that sounds really interesting. I think witchy stories are getting quite popular at the moment, and you'll see a couple more later on in this video. I am really fascinated by the story. I've heard a lot of good things. It's really popular at the moment, and I think it's really interesting to look at different kinds of magic. The last 3 books that I got for Christmas are all graphic novels. So the first one is Skyward. I first heard about this one on JD Ray Reid's channel. This is set in a world with quite a low amount of gravity, and it follows this girl who goes on an adventure to try and encourage her recluse father to leave his house. I believe he hasn't left his house in 20 years, and she is determined to change that. I have read the first issue in this book, and I really enjoyed it so far, and I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of it. The next one is the only one of these books that I've actually finished reading, and that is Moonstruck. This is such a cute fantasy romance with sort of an element of mystery. We follow these 2 characters, Selena and Julie, as they start dating, and they go to a magic show, and something really terrible happens, and that leads them to go on a quest to resolve this trouble. I found this book really entertaining. I think the last issue in this book was a little bit fast. I think it cut the story a little short for me, but overall I really enjoyed the story very much. The artwork is adorable, there's lots of body positivity, there is a sapphic romance at the heart of the story. One of the other main characters is genderqueer. I can't remember if they are agender or gender fluid, but I think they refer to them as they, so I would say agender. There is also, although it is a very small part of the story, there is a mermaid character who is in a wheelchair, and I think that's quite an interesting way of looking at a disability within a fantasy setting. I quite enjoyed that. However, I think they could have done with some more prevalent disability representation, as that was one background character, and I think they could have been quite a bit more throughout this story. However, I did really enjoy reading this book, and I'm quite looking forward to getting the next issue as well. The last book that I got for Christmas is one that I don't really know a lot about, but that is Maggie the Mechanic. I received this book from a member of my family who knows graphic novels quite a lot better than I do. I think this sounds like a really interesting story. I think it's definitely LGBT positive. I believe it follows this couple, but I don't really know a lot about it, and I think I'd like to sort of delve into the story without really knowing the plot. However, the artwork is entirely monochrome, and I think it looks really beautiful. I think it is quite different to a lot of the other stories I read, which are quite colourful, but I'm very excited to look into this as a new story. I think it is a complete story in and of itself, so that'll be really nice. So the final stack of books are the ones that I bought for myself at the end of December, and these are just a few that I had left over on my wish list that I just thought really like to get, and seeing as it's going to be a very long time until my birthday, I may as well just buy them all for myself now. I had a bit of gift money to use up, and so what better way of spending that money than buying loads more books that I probably won't read for a long time. I know myself too well here. So the first book on my list is one that I've heard quite a lot about recently. I believe it is a fairly recent release as well, which is probably why it is getting so much attention. But that is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. This involves witches and the suffragist movement. It sounds really fun. I believe this follows maybe 3 witches who try and take over the suffragist movement and try and bring back witches. I don't know too much detail about the story, but I think it is going to be a lot of fun. I love witchy characters. I love sort of the time period around like witch hunts and Salem witch hunts, Salem witch trials. So this world in which the story is set, there are supposed to be no witches whatsoever, and these 3 witches come together to take over the women's movement and bring back loads more witches. I think it sounds incredibly fun. It is quite different to other books I've read, and yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about this story recently, and I really look forward to getting to it quite soon. The second book that I bought for myself is one that I have actually read before, and that is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I read this book 10 years ago? I read this book back in school when I was doing my GCSEs, and I don't remember anything about it. I think I really enjoyed this story. It's not very long, just over 300 pages, although it felt much longer when you're reading it in class every day for months. So for those of you who don't know about this story, it is set in, I can't remember if it's Alabama. It's set in the deep south of USA, and it is set in the 1950s, which was a time when there was quite a lot of prejudice. This follows a white lawyer called Atticus Finch as he goes through the process of defending a black man who has been accused of raping a white woman. This is quite a difficult topic to base a story around. I think it is a very emotional story. However, the narrator of this story is a child, I believe about 8 years old maybe. I can't really remember how old the child is, but there's a lot of innocence behind the narrative, and so you see the brutality of the situation, but from a really innocent, naive position. And I think that is quite an interesting way of looking at a very awful situation. And yeah, I remember this book was one of the few that I actually enjoyed reading in school, so I am looking forward to reading this one again. I did have a copy of it myself when I was in school, but I lent it to a friend so that she could get my notes, and then she never gave it back. In any case, I would quite like to read this book again. I think for a classic it was quite interesting, and I would like to read quite a lot more American classics this year, I think. So yeah, this would be quite a nice one to read maybe a little later on in the year. The next book on my list is another one I was influenced to read by Reagan at Peruse Project, and that is Jade City by Fonda Lee. Now, I know Reagan has read this book within the past couple of months and she really enjoyed it. This is I think it's a fantasy. It's set in a world where Jade gives you different sort of superhuman powers. I don't know the details exactly, but I believe this follows two families who are sort of in crime syndicates, and they're sort of battling out to find all the jade. And I don't really know too much more than that, but it sounded really interesting, and honestly, I believe if Reagan loved it, then there is every chance that I am going to love this book too. So we then have another book that I was influenced by Reagan, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This is a fantasy book. I believe this follows a Latinx transgender boy, and he's trying to prove his identity to his family by summoning a demon, I think. I'm not sure. But then he accidentally summons a ghost, and he falls in love with the ghost. And this is supposed to be a really cute story. It sounds a bit heart-wrenching with, you know, a human and a ghost falling in love because they can't exactly be together. So I think it's going to be quite an emotional story, but I think it is also supposed to be quite funny and interesting as well. So I look forward to reading this. I don't know a lot about sort of Latinx culture, so I'm quite interested to see that in a story. I'm not sure I've read too many books from that cultural perspective, so I think this will be quite interesting. The next book on my list is The Mermaid, the Witch and the Sea by Maggie Tokuda Hall. I don't know too much about the story, but I know it follows a pirate, a mermaid, and a witch. It sounds incredible. I think this is going to be a really fun story. I don't want to know too much about it going in, but it is a fantasy. It's going to have so much magic. I really like pirate stories within the fantasy setting. I think that's going to be really cool. And yeah, more witches. I love witches. I'm really getting into witches at the moment, so I think that's going to be quite a lot of fun. The penultimate book on my list is one I am a little intimidated by, and that is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I believe this is a horror, although I think Reagan said it was like not overly scary, so that should be okay. I'm a little miffed because the dust cover's a bit torn. However, underneath the dust cover, it is a beautiful white. There is lovely foiled writing on the side, and I think it looks quite nice. Quite nice. The main character we follow is a bit of an outcast in her society. She grows up in a Puritan society, but the prophet has something against her, and then she discovers her own dark and mysterious powers. So yeah, more witches. It's a little bit scary, a little bit dark, and I'm looking forward to trying something that is a bit more spooky than I'm used to. Again, I think it's going to be quite intimidating, but it is quite different to what I'd normally read, so I think that would make a nice change. And it's not an overly long story, so I don't think it will scare me for too long. It is just over 300 pages, so yeah, it looks really spooky and exciting. And then last but not least, we have Middle Game by Seanan McGuire. I've never read Seanan McGuire before. I'm quite interested in Every Heart a Doorway. However, those books are less than 200 pages and they cost more than £10. So that's not going to happen. However, this book follows a set of twins, a boy and a girl, called Roger and Dodger, and they are sort of the result of an alchemical experiment. Roger has the power of words and Dodger has the power of numbers, and their sort of creator, the alchemist who made them, is going to use them to take over the world. Or at least that's what the synopsis implies. So yeah, it sounds interesting and spooky. I'm getting a little bit of vibes of The Night Circus, but that might just be the twin thing. But I am very interested in reading this story. I think it sounds really interesting. I have been sort of pushing this story off for a little while because I didn't know Seanan McGuire's writing before, and yeah, I think it will just be really exciting to sort of get into a new world. So that is the end of my book haul. I'm really excited to get to all of these books, and I think they're going to be a lot of fun. There's some books that are sort of a bit intimidating, quite different to what I would normally read. There's also a lot of fantasy, which is, you know, just the typical thing I read, like, literally all the time. So yeah, I think I have a lot of good books to choose from here, and hopefully I will get through a lot of them very soon. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave us a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of these books, if you've read them. Let me know what books you've got recently. I'd love to hear about all your bookish news. And I will see you again very soon. Bye!